In Peru, demonstrations against police repression by the Boluarte government continue. In El Salvador, social movements marched to commemorate the 31st anniversary of the signing of the peace accords. And in Spain, health workers in the community of Madrid rallied to demand greater investment in the public health system. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Saturday in Peru, Honduras marched through Lima once again, demanding the resignation of President Boluarte and protesting for the nearly 50 Peruvians who have been killed by police and military forces at the demonstration in past weeks. Hundreds of Peruvians gathered at the capital city to march from the historical center to Miraflores district. Demonstrators set off from the downtown San Martin Square with signs calling for the president's resignation, the holding of early elections for 2023, and an end to repression. Surrounded by dozens of shielded police and officers, they marched towards the Kennedy Park in the Miraflores district. Mobilizations from other provinces within the country are expected to arrive in Lima in the next few days. Social movements in El Salvador marched to celebrate the 31st year since the signing of the peace accords in that nation. Popular and political groups, as well as women's, teachers, trade unionists, and religious organizations of El Salvador called a mobilization for this Sunday to mark the end of the civil war that left more than 75,000 dead in 12 years. The concentration will leave from the central Cuscatlan Park to the Civic Square to raise the voice of those who are afraid to speak. The issue of the peace accords gained relevance in recent days after the Legislative Assembly approved to issue a public pronouncement on January 16, date of its signing, to make it National Day of the Victims of the Armed Conflict. At the same time, the government insists on discrediting the historical value of the peace pact and reiterating that the agreement was only between leaders. The government of Honduras declared Saturday a health emergency for 90 days in the entire territory due to the presence of avian influenza. The head of the Secretariat of Agriculture and Livestock, Laura Suazo, informed in a statement to the press that experts confirmed 123 cases of avian influenza in pelicans, of which 109 were found dead. The official pointed out that the emergency declaration has a preventive control and elimination character. She also stressed that this is a necessary step to guarantee that the country is not affected by this disease and urged the population to avoid contact with birds that may have died from it. Suazo added that the emergency, which has also been adopted by Mexico, Panama, and Chile, could be extended if necessary. The government of Colombia and the National Liberation Army will meet in Venezuela next week to resume peace talks. According to Oti Patiño, head of the Colombian government's negotiating team, dialogues will be resumed next Tuesday in Venezuela. At the meeting, the parties will discuss the ceasefire promoted by President Govt and evaluated by the insurgent group. The meeting will be held under an extraordinary character since the second round of talks with the ELN will start in Mexico in mid-February. In recent days, the ELN reiterated that it will respect the dialogue agenda with the Colombian government. A new massacre was reported in the rural area of Riohacha in northern Colombia. According to the Colombian Institute for Development and Peace Studies, the massacre in La Guajira makes a total of 4 in less than 15 days in 2023. This time in a rural area of Riohacha where 3 people were killed and incinerated. According to preliminary versions, the bodies were found a short distance from a community known as Puerto Caracol last Friday morning, January 13th. The identities of the victims are so far unknown, and according to the authorities, it is not clear how many people died in the scene, but preliminary information indicates that among the bodies is one of a woman. In Venezuela, the large march of homeland educators demonstrated its support to the educational policies implemented by the national government, together with their rejection of Western sanctions imposed on the country. During the mobilization, educators from all around the country raised their voices to defend the achievements of the Bolivarian Revolution, in spite of the blockades and illegal sanctions imposed on the country by the government of the United States. Likewise, the teachers and other demonstrators call on the people not to fall into Western provocations that seek to destabilize peace in the national territory. During the demonstration, Orlando Perez, president of the National Union Teachers Unitary Force, stated that President Nicolas Maduro and the Minister of Education, Yelitze Santaella, urged educators not to leave the classrooms in defense of their people. In her speech at the Great March of the Homeland Educators, Venezuela's Executive Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, said that despite the economic blockade imposed by the United States, the country achieved economic growth in all sectors in the year 2022.
We are here today, in January 2023, closing a victorious 2022 with a growth, comrades, a growth that we cannot deny, an economic growth in all sectors. But the enemy still exists, and during the last quarter of 2022, it wanted to disturb the economic peace, the social peace of our country. We lost and they brought stability, and our workers are suffering from it.
Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Spain, thousands of healthcare workers returned to the streets of Madrid on Sunday to protest against what they consider to be the dismantling of public health care by the conservative regional government, headed by Isabel Ayuso of Popular Party. With posters with slogans such as SOS Public Health, Stop Privatization, 2023 and Public Health Without a Solution, the demonstrators departed from the Ministry of Health, where they marched towards the Queen Sofia Museum Square in Madrid. They condemned the shortage of personnel and criticized what they consider to be a favoritism shown by regional authorities towards private healthcare providers. In this regard, they demand better working conditions to avoid overloaded care that hinders the provision of primary care to the people. In Portugal, public school workers marched this Saturday in Lisbon to demand better salaries, higher budget for education, and protest against student selection process. Demonstrators were summoned by Portugal's Union of All Professionals to the central Marquês de Pombal Square. According to the complaints, the march demanded the resignation of Education Minister João Costa and that Socialist Antonio Costa's government listened to their demands after almost 20 years of delays in improvements. Educators have scheduled a meeting with Education Minister on January 20th to discuss the future of public education in the country. The Royal College of Nurses, Britain's largest nurses union, will stage a new day of strikes in February if there is no progress in talks with the government. The number of staff taking part in the strike will double at that time, the union said Saturday. Salary disputes have intensified amidst the rising cost of living in the country. The union demands a salary increase equivalent to inflation plus 5% to avoid an exodus of National Health Service personnel. On December 15 and the 20th, the country's nurses held two massive strikes, and the unions estimated that some 100,000 people participated. In the United States, deaths rose to 9 after several tornadoes hit the southeastern part of the country. Authorities reported that the most affected states were Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. Efforts continue to fight people in the devastated area. Weather reports forecast more tornadoes, and a state of alert has been declared to protect some 35 million citizens. Meanwhile, the government of President Joe Biden approved a disaster declaration for the state of California, which has also felt the disastrous effects of the severe storm. And we have more news coming up after a short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Russia, car traffic transit on the Crimean bridge is fully resumed after the terrorist attack committed in October 2022. Local authorities report the resumption of the movement of cars and buses on the bridge, which had been suspended for repair and reconstruction works. Previously, on October 8th, a truck exploded while crossing the bridge, causing the death of 4 citizens and the burning of 7 train tank cars. The Russian Federal Security Service also reported that 12 people were behind the incident, including the head of the Central Intelligence Directorate of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. The Russian Defense Ministry announced in a press release Saturday that preparation by Ukraine of a massive provocation with explosives with the objective to frame Moscow. According to the statement, the provocation seeks to discredit Moscow's actions within the framework of the grain agreement, accusing it of creating a food shortage. The declaration states that Ukrainians are allegedly undermining a grain warehouse in Kharkov Oblast. The Russian ministry concluded that Kiev is trying to put pressure on the West's public opinion with such high-profile provocations in order to guarantee a new large-scale supplies of modern weapons and military equipment for the armed forces. An explosion and a subsequent fire was reported at a chemical plant in the Chinese province of Liaoning, leaving several workers injured. According to preliminary reports, the blaze occurred during scheduled maintenance work. Local authorities said that several workers were injured and were taken for medical attention. Search and rescue efforts for other possible victims are underway. Authorities are still investigating the causes of the accident. In Nepal, the civil aviation authorities announced that at least 68 people were killed after a local passenger plane with 72 people on board crashed in the Pokhara region. The fire on the plane has been put out as a search and rescue operation involving Nepali soldiers and police officers continues. The aviation authority added that the ill-fated ATR-72 plane from Yeti Airlines took off from Kathmandu for Pokhara at 10:30 a.m. local time, and it lost contact at 10:50 a.m. 3 people were rescued from the crashed plane and sent to hospital, said Guru Datta Dakal, Assistant Chief District Officer of Kaski District, where Pokhara is located. In the Philippines, authorities raised the death toll following floods in 42 provinces of the country to 27. The National Risk Reduction and Management Council added that 11 people injured and 3 others are still missing. Floods affected more than 614,000 people, displacing over 112,000 of them. More than 1,200 houses, 155 infrastructures, and 13 hectares of agricultural land were also damaged. The government declared a state of calamity in 31 cities and municipalities, many of which are still without power. In Israel, thousands take to the streets to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. According to local media, the protests were called by the Black Flags movement in Tel Aviv. Demonstrators reject the judicial reform initiative presented by Netanyahu. These protests took place in several cities throughout the country. Sources point out that this would be the largest mobilization ever recorded against the current Israeli government.
I think that the Israeli government should understand that it does have a mandate to destroy the Israeli democracy. That the fact that they are trying to destroy the checks and balances of the Israeli democracy, this will not work. And we will fight to the very last minute to save the Israeli democracy.
On Sunday, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that Israeli security forces killed a Palestinian man in the West Bank. Ahmed Hassan Abdul Jalil Kala, 45 years old, was shot in the neck with live ammunition near Silwat. Witnesses quoted by Wafa said the shooting was preceded by an argument between the man and Israeli soldiers who forced him to get out of his vehicle before shooting him at point blank. The victim is the 4th Palestinian killed this week by Israeli forces and the 13th so far in 2023. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.